The red dust swirled around the rover's wheels as it crawled across the Martian landscape. Back on Earth, in Houston's mission control, Dr. Alex Chen held her breath. After 3 years of planning, countless sleepless nights, and one devastating setback that nearly canceled the entire project, this was the moment of truth. The rover's specialized drill descended toward the rusty surface, about to pierce deeper into Mars than any human technology had ever gone before. "Drill sequence initiated," announced Flight Director Tom Wilson, his voice steady despite the tension filling the room. "Telemetry looking good." The story of how humanity reached this moment began not with grand ambitions, but with a simple, unexpected discovery in 2026. A routine analysis of data from an older Mars mission revealed something the initial researchers had missed: clear evidence of recent water movement beneath a specific region of the Martian surface. Not ancient water from billions of years ago, but something that had flowed within the last decade. The scientific community erupted. If liquid water existed on Mars now, not just in the distant past, it changed everything about our understanding of the red planet, and dramatically increased the chances that some form of microbial life might exist there. At NASA assembled a team of the world's best minds: geologists, astrobiologists, engineers, and visionaries. They called it Project Aquarius, and its mission was deceptively simple: find and sample that water. But on Mars, nothing is simple. "I remember the day they called me," said Dr. Chen in an interview last year. "I was teaching my undergraduate astrobiology class when my phone kept buzzing. When NASA's director personally asks you to drop everything and come to Houston, you don't say no." Chen had pioneered a revolutionary technique for detecting biological markers in extremely harsh environments, exactly what Project Aquarius needed. The team faced enormous challenges from the start. Mars is an average of 140 million miles from Earth. Radio signals take anywhere from 4 to 24 minutes to travel between the planets, making real-time control impossible. Any rover sent to Mars needed to be largely autonomous, capable of making critical decisions without human input. Then there was the Martian environment itself: frigid temperatures dropping to -195 degrees Fahrenheit, radiation levels that would kill a human in days, and dust storms that could engulf the entire planet. Any equipment sent there needed to withstand conditions that would destroy most technology. The Perseverance 2 rover represented humanity's best engineering, a 6-wheeled laboratory packed with the most advanced scientific instruments ever sent to another world. Its special drill could penetrate over 20 feet below the surface, where the theorized water might be protected from radiation and extreme temperature fluctuations. But 3 months into development, the project hit its first major crisis. Congressional budget cuts threatened to cancel the mission entirely. It was Dr. Chen who stepped forward, transforming overnight from scientist to passionate advocate. Her testimony before the Senate Space Committee went viral, not for political reasons, but because of her raw, honest explanation of what this mission meant for humanity. "Mars isn't just another scientific curiosity," she told the senators. "It's a mirror showing us what Earth could become. Understanding Mars helps us protect our own planet. And if we find life there, even microscopic life that evolved independently, it would be the most significant discovery in human history, proving we're not alone in the universe." Funding was restored the following week. The launch in late 2028 went flawlessly, but the 7-month journey to Mars proved more challenging than anyone anticipated. A solar flare damaged some of the communication systems, requiring ingenious workarounds from engineers. The landing sequence, what NASA veterans still call 7 minutes of terror, nearly ended in disaster when unexpected wind patterns threatened to slam the rover into a ridge of sharp rocks. Now, after all that, the moment of truth had arrived. The drill bit into the rusty soil, sending back readings no human had ever seen before. "We're getting moisture readings," systems engineer Raj Patel announced, his voice rising with excitement. "Definite increase as we pass the 15-foot mark." The team erupted in cautious celebration. But Dr. Chen remained focused on her monitor, watching as the drill sensors sent back the first chemical analysis. Her expression changed suddenly. The room fell silent as she zoomed in on one particular reading. "That's not possible," she whispered, though the microphone carried her words to everyone. The chemical signature, it doesn't match any of our models. Tom leaned over her shoulder. What are you seeing, Alex? She looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and wonder. If I didn't know better, I'd say this isn't just water. The molecular structure shows signs of alteration. Deliberate alteration. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. No natural process could explain what they were seeing, and then, without warning, the transmission from the rover abruptly ceased. Silence filled mission control. Screens that moments ago had displayed a steady stream of data from Perseverance 2 now showed nothing but error messages and flatlined readings. What just happened? Tom demanded, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time since the mission began. Did we lose the signal? Engineers frantically worked their stations, fingers flying across keyboards. No atmospheric interference detected, called out communications specialist Maya Rodriguez. All receiver systems are functioning normally. The rover just stopped transmitting. Dr. Chen stared at her screen, mind racing through possibilities. Equipment failure? Power loss? Or something connected to that strange chemical signature they detected? Play back the last 30 seconds of telemetry, she ordered, pulling her chair closer to the main display. Frame by frame. As the team watched the final moments of transmission, Dr. Chen pointed to a spike in the electromagnetic readings just before communications cut out. That's not consistent with any mechanical failure I've ever seen. The room fell quiet again, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Someone finally voiced what many were thinking. Could it be intentional interference? Dr. Chen had encountered skepticism throughout her career. As a child growing up in a small Midwest town, she'd announced her intention to work for NASA at age 9, after a night spent stargazing with her grandfather. Her high school science teacher had gently suggested more practical career options. Later, her doctoral thesis on potential biosignatures in extreme environments had initially been dismissed by several prominent colleagues. But each time, her methodical approach and unwavering dedication had proven her worth. Now, facing the biggest mystery of her career, she fell back on that same methodical thinking. Let's not jump to conclusions, she cautioned. We need to rule out all technical explanations first. The next 12 hours became a blur of diagnostic tests, signal attempts, and increasingly desperate efforts to re-establish contact with the rover. NASA administrators arrived, followed by representatives from international space agencies that had contributed to Project Aquarius. The White House requested hourly updates. By midnight, most of the team had been working for over 20 hours straight. Tom insisted Dr. Chen take a break, and she reluctantly stepped outside the building for the first time since the crisis began. The night air felt unexpectedly cool against her face. She looked up at the sky, finding the faint reddish that was Mars. Somewhere up there, 140 million miles away, their rover sat silent on the dusty surface, possibly holding answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. Are we alone? Could we survive on another world? Penny, for your thoughts. The voice startled her. It was Dr. James Wong, the team's geologist, offering a cup of coffee. Just wondering what we missed, she admitted, accepting the steaming cup. All our simulations, all our planning, nothing prepared us for this. Dr. Wong nodded thoughtfully. You know, this reminds me of something that happened during the first Antarctic core samples I worked on. We were drilling through ice that hadn't seen daylight in millions of years. When we finally broke through to an ancient subglacial lake, our equipment registered readings that made absolutely no sense. What was it? Dr. Chen asked. Turned out we discovered an entirely new ecosystem, microorganisms that had evolved in complete isolation for millions of years. They had cellular structures unlike anything we'd classified before. He paused. Sometimes the universe reminds us how little we actually know. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya running toward them, eyes wide with excitement. You need to come back. Something's happening. Back in mission control, the atmosphere had transformed from defeated exhaustion to cautious excitement. One of the screens showed a weak but definite signal coming from Perseverance 2. It started about 3 minutes ago, explained the night shift engineer. It's not our standard telemetry protocol. It's something else entirely. Dr. Chin leaned closer, studying the pattern. It's repeating. The same sequence over and over. Tom joined them. Some kind of automated distress signal? No, Dr. Chin said slowly, the realization dawning on her. It's not one of our program's sequences at all. This pattern wasn't created by the rover's systems. The team exchanged glances as the implications sank in. Are you suggesting? Tom couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Chin took a deep breath. I'm suggesting that someone, or something, is using our rover to send a message. The senior NASA administrator who had been quietly observing from the back of the room now stepped forward. Dr. Chin, that's an extraordinary claim. We need to consider more conventional explanations. Of course, she agreed. But look at this pattern analysis. It shows clear mathematical properties, prime numbers in sequence. That's not random static or equipment malfunction. The discussion was interrupted by another alert. The main screen switched to show a new data stream coming from Perseverance 2. This time, it was a series of images. The first image appeared, blurry and distorted. The team leaned forward as one, barely breathing as the computer enhanced and clarified the picture. That's not from our cameras, whispered Maya. That's not the Martian surface we've been seeing. The image showed what appeared to be a structure, geometric, with smooth surfaces that reflected light in ways that natural rock formations never could. And at the edge of the frame, partially obscured but unmistakable, was something that looked like writing. Dr. Chen felt her heart pounding as she spoke the words that would forever change human history. We need to assemble the first contact protocol team. Now. The atmosphere in Mission Control transformed overnight. What had been a scientific research center now resembled something between a military command post and an academic think tank gone into overdrive. New faces appeared, linguists, cryptographers, anthropologists, and several people in unmarked suits who spoke in hushed tones. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of a storm. As more images came through, each more astounding than the last, she struggled to maintain scientific objectivity. The structure was unmistakably artificial, a series of interconnected domes partially buried beneath the Martian surface, with what appeared to be airlocks and observation ports. We've been looking in the wrong places all these years, Dr. Wong said, his voice barely above a whisper as they examined the latest transmission. All our rovers, all our orbiters, we were scanning the surface while they've been beneath our feet the whole time. If this is genuine, Dr. Chen reminded him, always the cautious scientist despite her racing pulse. We still need to rule out equipment malfunction or data corruption. Yet with each passing hour, such explanations seemed increasingly unlikely. The signal pattern had evolved, growing more complex and organized. The cryptography team believed they were seeing the foundations of a communication attempt, mathematical sequences that could potentially serve as the building blocks of a shared language. 3 days after the initial signal loss, President Rivera addressed the nation in a carefully worded speech that acknowledged anomalous data from the Mars mission without confirming the more extraordinary possibilities. Behind the scenes, however, international tensions were mounting. Every spacefaring nation wanted access to the data, claiming rights to what might be the most significant discovery in human history. This doesn't belong to any one country, Dr. Chen argued during a heated meeting with government officials. If we're truly receiving contact from another intelligence, this is a moment for all humanity. Some officials nodded in agreement, others exchanged skeptical glances. That night, as Dr. Chen finally returned to her temporary quarters for a few hours of much-needed rest, she found Tom waiting outside her door. "Security breach," he said without preamble, his face grim. "Someone's been downloading the image files and transmission data. We've tracked at least 3 unauthorized access points." Sleep forgotten, they rushed back to the secure facility. Maya met them at the entrance, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "You need to see this," she said, leading them not to mission control but to a smaller analytical lab where a subset of the team had been working on the transmission patterns. "We've been running the signal through different filters, trying to isolate any potential audio components. On the main screen was a waveform display, pulsing gently. Dr. Wong was already there, along with two of the linguists. "Play it," he urged. A tapped a command, and a sound filled the room, rhythmic, structured, and utterly unlike anything a human would create. Yet somehow, unmistakably, it carried the hallmarks of language, patterns, repetition, variation. "It started coming through about an hour ago," Maya explained. "Embedded in the carrier signal." One of the linguists, Dr. Patel, pointed to a repeating section of the waveform. "This pattern keeps appearing at regular intervals. If this is a language, it could be a greeting or identifier, something they believe is important enough to emphasize." "Or a warning," added the second linguist quietly. The implications hung in the air. If they were indeed receiving communication from an intelligence on Mars, what did it want? Was it indigenous to the planet, or had it come from somewhere else? And perhaps most disturbingly, had it been there watching as humans sent rover after rover to explore what they had thought was an uninhabited world? The next morning brought an unexpected development. The rover's cameras, which had been sending images of the structure, suddenly showed movement. Something was approaching the rover, a mechanical construct unlike anything in NASA's design archives, moving with deliberate purpose across the Martian soil. "It's some kind of probe or drone," speculated the engineering lead as they watched the feed. "Look at how it's scanning the rover." The device was roughly spherical, about the size of a basketball, with multiple articulated appendages that moved with remarkable precision. It circled Perseverance 2, seemingly examining every detail. "It's not destroying anything," Dr. Chen observed. "It appears to be studying us, just as we've been studying Mars." The alien device extended one of its appendages toward the rover's communication array, the very system that had mysteriously failed before reactivating with the strange transmissions. "It's going to make contact," someone whispered. The feed abruptly cut to static once more, but only for seconds. When it returned, the perspective had changed. They were no longer seeing from the rover's cameras. "We're seeing through their technology now," Dr. Chen realized, a chill running down her spine. "They've hijacked our visual feed." The image pulled back, revealing Perseverance 2 in its entirety, a lonely human-made object on the rusty landscape. Then the view shifted, turning toward what appeared to be an entrance, a massive doorway built into the side of a cliff face that no satellite or previous mission had ever detected. The feed moved forward, taking them through the entrance and into a tunnel that sloped downward. Light sources of unknown origin illuminated what could only be described as a facility, vast chambers carved into the Martian bedrock, filled with technology and structures whose purposes they could only guess at. And then, at last, the camera stopped, focusing on what appeared to be a control center. In the center stood what was unmistakably a being not human, but humanoid enough that its stance and posture registered as intelligent, purposeful. It faced the camera directly, as if aware of the watching eyes back on Earth, and raised what might have been a hand in a deliberate gesture. Behind Dr. Chen, one of the government officials whispered, "My God." Maya's monitoring equipment suddenly lit up with alerts. Massive energy spike detected from the Martian surface. "It's unlike anything we've ever recorded." Dr. Chen stared at the screen, at the being who stared back across 140 million miles of space, and knew with absolute certainty that humanity stood at a threshold from which there was no return. "They're not just sending us images or sounds anymore," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I think they're about to show us exactly who they are and what they want." The being moved its limb in what appeared to be a beckoning gesture, and something began to materialize beside it, a holographic display showing a familiar blue planet, Earth. The holographic Earth rotated slowly, a perfect blue marble suspended in the alien control center. Then, before the stunned eyes of everyone in mission control, the image changed. The blue faded, replaced by expanding brown patches. Ice caps shrank visibly. Coastlines altered as sea levels rose dramatically. "It's showing Earth's future," Dr. Wong whispered. "Climate change projections," but Dr. Chen shook her head, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Look at the time stamp in our telemetry data. This isn't a projection." Her voice dropped so low that only those standing closest could hear her. It's a memory. The implications hit the room like a physical force. If this being was showing Earth as it once was, then, they've been here before, Tom said, completing the thought that no one wanted to voice. The alien being made another gesture, and the hologram shifted again. This time it showed a series of images in rapid succession. A spacecraft leaving Mars, approaching Earth, humans from various ancient civilizations looking skyward in wonder and fear. Structures appearing on Earth that matched architectural elements they'd glimpsed in the Martian facility. My God, breathed Dr. Patel. They're claiming they visited Earth in our ancient past. One of the government officials stepped forward. We need to inform the president immediately. This has serious national security implications. Dr. Chen barely heard him. She was focused on a pattern emerging in the historical sequences, locations across Earth where the beings had apparently made contact. Something about the distribution nagged at her mind, triggering connections to research she'd read years ago. Maya, she called out, pull up the Global Survey of Unexplained Radioisotope Anomalies from the Sheffield University study. As Maya worked, the alien transmission continued, showing what appeared to be the beings departing Earth, returning to Mars. Then came images of catastrophe, massive dust storms, solar radiation spikes. The Martian beings retreating underground. Their numbers dwindling. Maya finally spoke. I've got the radioisotope study. What am I looking for? Overlay it with the contact locations from the transmission. When Maya did so, the correlation was unmistakable. Every site where the alien imagery showed contact with ancient humans corresponded with locations on Earth that exhibited unusual radioisotope patterns, anomalies that had been dismissed as measurement errors or attributed to unknown natural phenomena. They left evidence, Dr. Chen said, her scientific mind racing ahead. Traces of their presence in our soil that we've been detecting for years without understanding what we were seeing. The alien beings seemed to be waiting for their reaction. After a moment, it gestured again, and new images appeared, this time showing Earth's current technological state. Satellites, space stations, rovers on Mars. The being pointed to these images and then to itself in what seemed like a gesture of recognition. I think it's acknowledging our technological achievement, Dr. Wong suggested. Maybe that's why they're making contact now. We've finally reached a level they consider worth engaging with. But before anyone could respond to this theory, the transmission changed again. The being stepped aside, revealing a second figure approaching from deeper within the facility. This one moved differently, with a gait that seemed oddly familiar. Enhance that section, Dr. Chen ordered, suddenly alert to something she couldn't quite place. As the image clarified, the second figure came into focus. Unlike the first being, with its clearly non-human proportions, this one moved with an unmistakably human stride. It stepped fully into view, and a collective gasp rose from everyone watching that it was a human. Or at least, it appeared to be. That's impossible, Tom whispered, but they were all seeing it, a figure that, despite strange clothing and some subtle differences in posture, was undeniably human standing alongside the alien being on Mars. The human figure raised its hand in greeting, mouth moving in what was clearly speech, though no sound accompanied the image. Are they trying to tell us they've captured humans? One of the military officials demanded. Is this a hostage situation? No, Dr. Chen said slowly, a new and even more disturbing possibility forming in her mind. Look at the way they're interacting. That's not captivity, it's cooperation. The transmission continued, showing more humans working alongside the Martian beings in various parts of the underground facility. Some operated equipment, others appeared to be studying Martian artifacts. I don't understand, Maya said. How could humans be on Mars? We've never sent people there. But even as she asked, Dr. Chen was accessing classified mission records, files that her security clearance had only recently granted her access to. There were rumors, she said, scrolling through data. Unofficial missions. Black projects from the early space race that were never acknowledged. Tom leaned in, his expression grim. Are you suggesting some secret mission actually reached Mars decades ago? That's not possible with the technology of the time. Not with our technology, Dr. Chen corrected him, the pieces falling into place with terrifying clarity. As if confirming her suspicion, the transmission shifted again. Now it showed what appeared to be historical footage, grainy, black and white images of what was unmistakably a human spacecraft of 1960s vintage making a controlled landing on the Martian surface. But the design was like nothing in the official record, with elements that seemed decades ahead of its time. They helped us get there, Dr. Wong realized. Some secret faction on Earth made contact and got their assistance. The government officials were now in frantic communication with Washington. The military presence in the room had doubled in the last few minutes. Dr. Chen could feel control of the situation slipping away from the scientific team. The alien being seemed to sense this too. It made another gesture, and the human figure stepped forward, now clearly addressing the camera directly. Though there was still no audio, the lips formed words that any viewer could read. "We need your help." The transmission abruptly cut to a new image, a massive asteroid. Its trajectory clearly plotted on a collision course with Mars. Data scrolled alongside it, showing impact calculations and a timestamp. Dr. Chen's blood ran cold as she processed the numbers. This impact event, it's predicted in 3 weeks. "Is this a threat?" demanded one of the military officers. "Are they saying they'll redirect it toward Earth if we don't help?" Dr. Chen shook her head, still analyzing the data. "No. The calculations show it's a natural trajectory. They're not threatening us, they're warning us." "Warning us about what?" Tom asked. "An asteroid hitting Mars doesn't threaten Earth." Dr. Chen turned to face the room, the full implications now clear to her. The impact won't just affect Mars. According to these calculations, it will hit with enough force to eject massive amounts of Martian material into space. She paused, letting her next words sink in. "Including whatever microorganisms might exist in the subsurface water we detected." Dr. Wong caught on immediately. "Panspermia. Material from Mars reaching Earth." "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "They're not warning us about the asteroid itself. They're warning us about what it might bring to Earth." The human figure on screen was still mouthing the same phrase over and over, "We need your help." The alien being made one final gesture, and the transmission ended with an image that left everyone in stunned silence. What appeared to be a microscopic organism, its structure unlike anything in Earth's biological catalog, with a timestamp indicating it had been discovered in the Martian subsurface water just days before Perseverance 2 made its fateful drill. "Get me the CDC and WHO on the line immediately," ordered the senior NASA administrator, breaking the spell of silence. "And contact every space agency with launch capability. We have 3 weeks to prevent a potential extinction-level event." Dr. Chen stared at the final frozen image, her mind racing through calculations and possibilities. Everything humanity thought they knew about Mars, about their own history, and about their place in the solar system had just been upended. And now they faced a threat none of them had ever imagined possible. The clock was ticking. 3 weeks to save not one world, but 2 that the next 3 weeks unfolded at a pace that would have seemed impossible before this crisis. The world's space agencies, suddenly united by an existential threat, worked around the clock to repurpose every available rocket. Military satellites were ret-asked for deep space observation. Underground bunkers were prepared. And at the center of it all, a continuous stream of communication flowed between Earth and the Martian facility. Dr. Chen barely left mission control, catching sleep in short bursts on a cot in the corner of the room. The Martian beings, who called themselves the Arisian people, from Ares, the Greek name for Mars, had established a more direct communication system. The human figures served as translators, explaining that they were descendants of the secret missions from decades ago, born on Mars to the original Earth astronauts who had chosen to remain. "My grandfather was part of the Horizon Project," explained David Harlow, one of the Mars-born humans. His face on the screen looked almost like any Earth human, though his tall, lean frame showed the effects of Martian gravity. 3 ships were sent in 1973, outside normal NASA channels. The program was funded by a private consortium worried about the Cold War turning hot. They saw Mars as humanity's backup plan. The story he told filled in gaps that had long puzzled space historians: unexplained rocket fuel purchases, missing scientists, technology advances that seemed to appear suddenly without clear developmental steps. But why keep it secret all these years? Tom asked during one of the briefings. David's expression turned somber. The Arisians have been watching Earth for millennia. They've seen your wars, your environmental destruction. There was concern about what might happen if certain factions on Earth gained access to their technology too quickly. Dr. Chen had to admit the logic, however uncomfortable it made her. And this asteroid? You're certain of the calculations? Absolutely, David confirmed. We've been tracking it since it was knocked out of the asteroid belt last year. The impact will hit directly over the largest subsurface water reservoir on Mars. Our models show significant material will achieve escape velocity and eventually reach Earth's atmosphere. The plan that emerged was audacious: a joint Earth-Mars mission to divert the asteroid using a combination of Earth's nuclear capabilities and Arisian gravitational technology. It would require perfect coordination, split-second timing, and technology that most of Earth's population didn't even know existed. 2 weeks in, as preparations reached their most critical phase, Dr. Chen found herself working directly with Kira, one of the lead Arisian scientists. Despite their physical differences, Kira's elongated limbs and enlarged cranium reflecting generations of evolution in Mars' lower gravity, they found common ground in their methodical approach to problem-solving. Your species adapts quickly, Kira observed as they finalized calculations for the intercept mission. In just days, you've accepted revelations that should have shattered your worldview. Dr. Chen smiled wryly. Not everyone is adapting so well. Religious leaders are struggling to incorporate your existence into their theologies. Conspiracy theorists are having a field day. Half of them think we're making you up, the other half think they've been right all along. Kira made a sound that the translation software interpreted as laughter. Perhaps both are partially correct. Myths of sky people on your world originated from our early contacts. Yet what's happening now goes beyond even the most creative human theories. As the asteroid approached its critical point, 3 joint missions launched, 2 from Earth using modified ICBMs with enhanced payloads, and 1 from Mars utilizing Arisian technology that manipulated gravitational fields in ways Earth scientists were still struggling to understand. The world held its breath. For the first time in human history, a global broadcast united every nation, every person with access to any form of media. Dr. Chen, Tom, Dr. Wang, and Maya found themselves in the unusual position of narrating humanity's first public interplanetary defense mission. The nuclear payloads will reach the asteroid in approximately 3 minutes, Dr. Chen explained to the billions watching. They're not intended to destroy it, that would only create multiple impact threats. Instead, they'll alter its trajectory enough for the Arisian gravitational manipulator to capture it in a controlled field. The plan worked with unexpected precision. The nuclear detonations, occurring on the asteroid's far side to push rather than fragment it, altered its course by crucial degrees. Then the Arisian device, which had been positioned in advance, activated, creating a visible distortion in space that gently tugged the massive rock into a stable orbit around Mars. Cheers erupted in mission control, echoed in control rooms and living rooms around the world. Dr. Chen allowed herself a moment of pure relief before the analytical part of her mind kicked back in. The asteroid is secured, she confirmed. But we still need to assess any material that might have been dislodged before interception. That assessment came sooner than expected. As the teams on Earth and Mars monitored the newly captured asteroid, now becoming a temporary moon of Mars, an alert came from one of the atmospheric monitoring stations in Antarctica. We're detecting unusual particulate matter in the upper atmosphere, reported the station chief. Composition analysis shows Martian origin. The celebration abruptly ceased. Despite their success with the asteroid itself, some material ejected during the early stages of the mission had already reached Earth. We need containment protocols immediately, ordered the CDC representative who had been stationed at NASA throughout the crisis. Global alert to all health monitoring systems. Dr. Chen watched as the room descended into controlled chaos once more. But before panic could fully take hold, a message came through from the Arisian facility. "We anticipated this possibility," Kira's translated voice explained. The ejected material was from the asteroid itself, not from Mars' surface or subsurface. It contains no biological material. Relief washed through the room once more, but Dr. Chen noticed something in Kira's posture that the others missed, a subtle tension that her weeks of communication with the Arisian had taught her to recognize. "There's something else, isn't there?" she asked directly. A pause, then Kira responded. "You are perceptive, Dr. Chen." "Yes, there is more we must discuss. The asteroid's composition, it is unique. Analysis shows it originated not from our solar system, but from interstellar space." New data appeared on their screens, complex molecular structures unlike anything in Earth's scientific catalogs. "This is not a natural asteroid," David added, his voice grave. "It bears markers of artificial manipulation at the atomic level. Someone or something directed it toward Mars." The implications silenced everyone in mission control. Dr. Chen found her voice first. "Are you suggesting this was deliberate? An attack?" "We cannot be certain," Kira responded. "But it follows a pattern we have detected twice before in our history. The previous impacts contributed to Mars' loss of atmosphere and surface water." Dr. Wang leaned forward. "If this was intentional, then whoever did it might try again." "Yes," Kira confirmed, "which is why we have a proposal for Earth's nations. A formal alliance. Shared technology. Joint defense systems. Preparation for what may come next." The Arisian leader appeared on screen now, flanked by the Council of Mars-born humans. "For too long, we have observed from afar. For too long, we have kept ourselves separate from Earth's development. That time is over. We face a common threat, one that may have been watching both our worlds for longer than either of our civilizations has existed." Dr. Chen looked around the room at the representatives from nations that, just weeks earlier, had been locked in geopolitical rivalries. Now they sat together, united by a threat none of them had imagined possible. "We will need time," she said, "to bring our people along. This is a lot to process." "Understanding takes time," the Arisian leader acknowledged. "But perhaps less than you think. Your world is about to witness something that may help." At that moment, phones and tablets throughout mission control lit up with alerts. Outside, people were pointing at the night sky visible through the windows. Dr. Chen rushed to look outside, followed by Tom and the others. Above them, clearly visible against the darkening sky, W. As the asteroid now captured in its stable orbit around Mars, reflecting sunlight so brightly that it appeared as a new star next to the red planet. "We have adjusted its position," Kira explained. "It will be visible from Earth for the next month as a symbol of what we accomplished together." Dr. Chen stared up at the new light in the sky, her mind racing with implications. In a single month, humanity had discovered they weren't alone, learned of a secret space program that had been operating for decades, helped prevent a potential extinction event, and now faced the prospect of an interplanetary alliance against an unknown cosmic threat. As she watched, the asteroids' reflection seemed to pulse slightly, an optical illusion, she assumed. But then her phone buzzed with an urgent message from one of the observation teams. The asteroid was changing, its surface rearranging at the molecular level. Within minutes, every telescope on Earth was trained on the phenomenon. The asteroid's surface was forming patterns, precise geometric shapes that shifted and evolved. Then, as billions watched, the pattern stabilized into a form that was unmistakably deliberate. "It's a message," whispered Dr. Wang. "Written in a mathematical language both our worlds can understand." Dr. Chen felt a chill run down her spine as the translation appeared on her screen. The message was simple, direct, and changed everything they thought they knew. "We are not alone," she read aloud. "And neither are they." The final line of data provided coordinates, not to any location in their solar system, but to a point in deep space. A point that, according to astronomical databases, had recently begun emitting unusual radio signals that previously had been dismissed as background noise. Dr. Chen looked up at the sky again, now seeing it with entirely new eyes. The search for water on Mars had led them to a discovery far beyond what anyone had imagined, not just life on another world, but an expanded understanding of humanity's place in a universe that suddenly seemed much more crowded, much more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than they had ever dreamed. And somewhere out there, something was watching. 6 months after the asteroid incident, Dr. Chen stood on a platform at the newly established International Space Collaboration campus outside Houston. Behind her stood a mixed group of Earth scientists and diplomats alongside 3 Arisian visitors and 2 Mars-born humans who had made the journey to Earth for this historic occasion. The crowd before them represented nearly every nation on the planet. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed audience. "The Interplanetary Defense and Exploration Treaty has been ratified by 142 nations. For the first time, we stand truly united, not just as a planet, but as part of a larger community within our solar system." The changes that had swept across Earth in the months since the revelation of the Arisian civilization had been profound but remarkably orderly. Religious institutions had adapted with surprising flexibility, many finding ways to incorporate the existence of Martian life into their theologies. Scientific communities had exploded with innovation as limited exchanges of technology began. The economy had initially struggled with the paradigm shift but quickly rebounded around new industries focused on space development. Most surprising to Dr. Chen had been the psychological resilience of ordinary people. The initial shock and occasional panic had given way to a collective sense of purpose that transcended old divisions. Former adversaries now collaborated on joint defense systems. Climate initiatives gained unprecedented support as humanity recognized the fragility of planetary ecosystems. Children played with toys representing both human and Arisian astronauts working together. The transition team has completed preparations for the first official Earth delegation to Mars, Dr. Chen continued. 32 specialists from 18 countries will depart next month to establish the joint research facility at Olympus Base. She turned to acknowledge David Harlow, who would be returning home with them. "They will be joining our Mars-born colleagues in studying the coordinates transmitted through the asteroid." Those coordinates had become the focus of intense scientific interest. Powerful telescopes and radio arrays, now operating with enhanced technology shared by the Arisians, had detected what appeared to be artificial structures at the distant location, a star system nearly 40 light-years from Earth. "We still don't know who sent the asteroid," Tom said later that evening as the team gathered for a private dinner. After months of working together, they had become something closer than colleagues but different from family, a bond forged through shared discovery and crisis. "The Arisians believe it was a test, a probe to assess our response capabilities. Or perhaps a provocation," offered Dr. Wang, who had been leading analysis of the limited data they had gathered from the distant star system. "Attempting to pit potential allies against each other before either became too powerful." Maya, recently promoted to head of Earth-Mars communications, shook her head. "Either way, we passed the test. Instead of blaming each other or fighting over the technology, we collaborated." David Harlow nodded, his tall frame still adjusting to Earth's gravity after a lifetime on Mars. "That's what impressed our council most. Throughout your history, humans have typically responded to external threats by turning against each other first. This time was different." Kira, who had become the first Arisian ambassador to Earth, made the subtle gesture that humans had learned was their equivalent of agreement. "Our histories share many parallels. Both our worlds developed intelligent life. Both faced climate challenges, yours ongoing, ours ultimately catastrophic to surface life. Both explored space. Both sought water and the promise of life it represents." Dr. Chen thought about the water that had started this journey, the initial readings from Perseverance 2 that had led to the greatest discovery in human history. "Water connected us in ways we never imagined," she mused. "We sent a rover looking for Martian water, and instead found common ground with another civilization." Later that night, Dr. Chen stood alone on the observation deck, looking up at the night sky. Mars glowed red in the distance, with the captured asteroid, now a permanent artificial satellite, shimmering beside it. Teams of scientists from both worlds were still studying its unusual properties and the message it had conveyed. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The Deep Space Array had detected new signals from the distant star system, stronger and more complex than before. Analysis would take time, but preliminary patterns suggested they were responding to the joint Earth-Mars transmissions that had been sent 3 months earlier. Dr. Chen smiled to herself. 20 years ago, she'd been that determined 9-year-old, staring up at the stars with her grandfather, declaring she would work for NASA someday. Never in her wildest dreams could she have imagined where that path would lead, not just to discovering water on Mars, but to reshaping humanity's place in the cosmos. The search for life beyond Earth had always been humanity's greatest quest, driven by a simple, profound question: are we alone? Now they had their answer, more complex and more promising than anyone had anticipated. They were not alone in the solar system. They were not alone in the galaxy. And perhaps most importantly, they were no longer alone in facing whatever mysteries and challenges the universe held. As she watched, a streak of light cut across the sky, the first joint Earth-Aresian mission launching toward the asteroid belt to establish an early warning system. The flickering light symbolized everything they had accomplished and all that was yet to come. The water they had sought on Mars had led them not to a conclusion, but to a beginning. Whatever lay ahead, peaceful contact or cosmic conflict, humanity would face it with new allies, new knowledge, and a new understanding of their place in the universe. The greatest journey in human history wasn't ending. It was just getting started.